So I'm back here with AshliAnna. If you caught the last episode, we are recording this episode on the same day. So we're in the same clothes, in the same spot. Trust me, we do have other clothes that we like to wear, but it was just that we had the time. So we wanted to record on another topic. Sewing is the connection between the clothing and textiles in our lives. If you have a sewing machine that you lack the confidence to use, this channel is for you. I'm Naomi Feda, and I'm here to help you learn to alter, repair, and decorate the textiles that surround you. Let's think outside the box together to find solutions for those items that aren't working. I know that I talk a lot about thrifting, both for the sustainability and also, as a working mom, or when you have kids and you're trying to budget a little bit, and it's always great to cut cost of clothing a little bit if you can find stuff that fits really well at a thrift store. Um, but there's so many things that we could talk about when we're looking at our clothing, both from the colors, but also from other aspects. And so one thing that we were just talking about was ruffles, because I know, so say you walk into a thrift store and you find a shirt that might be in your colors, but in terms of like ruffles, I know for me, I don't tend to wear a lot of ruffles, I don't think. I think I've had some more like lace embellishments more so than ruffles. But I was curious, like, is there a specific body shape that maybe um if you saw that piece that had ruffles in it, is like, should certain body types kind of embrace those and recognize that they look really good in them, or kind of steer clear of? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So what I love about like clothing is, it all just depends on the placement. So when it comes to body shape, the thing that we're trying to do is we're just trying to create balance of our tops and our bottoms. So everybody's heard of the hourglass shape, and the hourglass shape isn't to like necessarily put us in a box, or if you don't specifically have an hourglass shape, but the point is, or the takeaway from the hourglass shape is, if we're heavier on top, then we want to balance that on the bottom with, a silhouette that is a little wider so that we look more balanced. We can wear a belt to kind of make our hips come in a little bit, or just draw attention there. We can place a tank top underneath of a shirt to create the more balanced shape. So that's really all we're looking for. Somebody said on a podcast once, it was really good. They were like, we need to make sure that we don't tell women they have to dress to look skinnier, because I think that that's really
Right.
important. I think it's really important that what we're doing is we're harmonizing with our colors and the patterns and things like that that we're wearing with our God given features, but then we're balancing our top and bottom. That's all we're doing, right? Because wherever you're at now, your right now body is amazing. So, yeah, with ruffles, it's more about placement. So, keeping that balancing metaphor in mind, or that visual in mind, if you like ruffles, they're a little more of a softer, playful type of detail. If you like them, but they're just not placed right, then that's where you're going to decide whether or not you're going to either alter that piece or take that piece. So let me give you an example. If you're heavier chested, I wouldn't recommend, if you don't like it. If you like it, it doesn't matter. But if you're like, it adds volume here, and I'm already well endowed here, and I'm slimmer on bottom, so then I look really top heavy when I add ruffles. Great. Maybe ignore that piece. Or if you have some advice, Naomi, on how to get rid of the ruffles, depending on, where they're placed, that might be a good option for you if you love everything else about it. Because sometimes there's just one strip here, and you can just probably take.
Yes.
But at the bottom is where you would want ruffles, because ruffles
Right.
add volume. So if you're narrower waisted or have narrower legs, then you can put ruffles on the bottom. So it's all about placement. And what you need to remember with ruffles is, do I like the soft, feminine, playful movement of them? And also, where are they placed? And do I like where it's adding volume for my body shape?
Mm, that's really good. Yeah, so it's made me think of like different projects that I've done for people over the years as far as ruffles. And I would think it has to do with, especially if it's straight across the bust. I'd be really careful about buying that and thinking that you can alter it to take those ruffles off, because you really, if you sew, like make sure you know how it's constructed before you think that you can do that. Um, because the stitches might show a little bit, but for instance, if it was either a ruffle towards the bottom, sometimes that's much easier to take off because um it's attached as a separate piece. You can take it off and give the shirt a regular hem. I've also taken a lot of ruffles off of sleeves because it is true that I think I've seen pretty common, like where maybe you'll have a 3/4 length sleeve and a ruffle, or any kind of sleeve with a ruffle, and people will say, I can't stand the ruffle. Can you, or like a bell sleeve, can you take that off? And that is something that's totally alterable, much easier than saying I want to alter the entire ruffle across the bust line, especially if there's like multiple ruffles or something in that case. And I would think so. The other thing that I've run into with ruffles would be more if it's like a dress or a skirt, and if it has the ruffles that are coming downward.
Yep.
If you have to shorten the piece, it's just going to mean that you also have to shorten the ruffles. So that's like it's doable, but it's a layer of complication. So not that it can't be done, but it's just something to be aware of. Yeah, so I like that. And I'm thinking the other thought that I had about ruffles was like if it's in a skirt, do you have any advice about if it was towards the bottom of a skirt and you're more petite, or like is there anything as far as like your stature and a placement of a ruffle that would be advice that you would give?
For sure. So you're always looking at where are your visual lines. So one reason why I think a lot of women don't love like a flared sleeve or a bell sleeve or a ruffle sleeve is because it hits like the line is probably right across like the visual line right across
Mm-hmm.
where your chest is. And so they probably don't know why. Part of it is movement. Like some people don't like
Mm-hmm.
all this motion around them. So there's that. But the other part is it's adding more volume to where you're already voluminized, you know? And so for some women, it's like, that's uncomfortable. So keep that in mind because sometimes a really fun bell sleeve down here by your wrist is super fun, because, then it's not adding any volume here. And if you're not like a hippie person, then it could, like when your arms are down, it adds volume to your hips, which, or if you just like to show off your hips, because some of y'all got some nice curves, you like to show them off, then that's kind of a fun way. As far as a skirt goes with ruffles, there's so many different ways that it can be designed, right? Because there's like small little ruffles that you can have like
Yes.
all over the skirt.
Yes.
So for some of you, things that are too small in scale are not going to match your like movement, like the movement in your face, the movement in your body. And that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter if you're petite or if you're tall or like, more of a normal size person. I'm 5'1" and tiny. So I always call everybody else is a normal size. I'm petite size, fun size, I guess. So that's something to keep in mind is to really watch what your eye is drawn to. If you don't like small ruffles, I would just scrap it. So keep that in mind as scale. Um, if you're if you're petite, it's definitely more difficult to have a longer skirt. Again, this is kind of a preference thing, but I do feel like when you cut your legs off at a certain point, then it can feel unflattering and make you look shorter. So a lot of that has
Mm-hmm.
to do with your preference when it comes to the ruffles. But again, what you want to do is wherever you want to add volume. That's really the thing that I want you to remember is
Mm-hmm.
if you're putting ruffles across your hips and you don't like that it's adding more volume there, I don't know that like you said, you're going to have to determine whether you can alter that and take it off without seeing all the stitching and
Yeah.
whatnot. But if you want to add more volume toward the bottom, um, that might not be so bad if it's at the bottom of your skirt, because then it would balance out up here. So I'm just
Mm-hmm.
trying to like, how do I visually explain this? So like if you have no ruffles here and you just have that nice curve from your skirt, from your hips, and then you add a little bit of a ruffle detail right above the knee, then that can actually create the nice hourglass shape.
Oh,
It really can,
interesting.
because it's giving you that visual line more toward the bottom of and a lot of us have really nice calves and legs. Show those off for sure. Um, So I would say for most people, the best bet is to have ruffles toward the bottom, unless you're trying to create more volume around your hips and your thighs, for
Mm.
sure.
But so that reminds me of, so over the summer, I did a sewing class for like young people. So it was like a week-long sewing camp. And I had this pattern that it was like a rather voluminously ruffled sundress. And again, when you look at the picture on the pattern, you don't really exactly know how much ruffle until you get out the pattern pieces. And when we're looking at them, I mean, I think the skirt ruffles were probably 6 feet long.
Oh, wow.
Yes, yes. Like I was even like, oh, these are like huge. And so one of the students loved that. And she was probably a little bit more curvy and filled out. And one of the other ones had a much more straight figure
Yep.
still. And she also picked a black and white checked fabric.
Okay.
So if you can envision like black and white checked with voluminous ruffles for a sundress.
Oh,
Yes, very bold. So the black, but we had to alter it a whole lot.
yep.
And so I was thinking, even like, is there, so those were probably 8 inches apart for each ruffle,
Okay.
like in terms of spacing, and there was probably like four. So in that, we could take some of them off,
Right.
and then we did narrow them. So even from like a sewing perspective, depending on how like a ruffle is added to a piece, if it's like just, especially if it's on the bottom, if it's just too ruffled, sometimes you can take the piece off, diminish the circumference a little bit
Yep.
to fit your style, and then sew it back on. So sometimes there are options, but yeah, just being aware, I think. And like, would you say there was a reason why someone that's really very straight, like ruffles, especially in the whole bottom section, might not be the best fit? Like, would you have anything? I mean, maybe that's more also in terms of the symmetry, because if there's no ruffles on the top, you look very thin, and then all of a sudden you have like a hoop skirt on the bottom almost, which yes, it was in style many years ago, but
Right. And that is exactly, you nailed it right there. Like you can definitely, so if you are a more straight, which is like your rectangle body type, which I am, whatever you do on bottom, you almost have to do on the top. So
okay,
if you add volume with ruffles on the bottom, then you're either going to visually want to widen your shoulders with like a wide V-neck, or even like a boat neck would be really helpful to
okay,
balance. Does that make sense? Same,
yeah,
it's almost the same thing applies though when you're an hourglass shape itself. Because when you're an hourglass shape, you can very easily become imbalanced because you already are. So when you're a rectangle shape and an hourglass shape, I have noticed that you have to be careful how much whatever you do to the top that you're also doing to the bottom. So that would be my only piece of advice, to keep that balance visually.
yeah. Well, that's so, yeah, so interesting to think about. And so I'm thinking of one of the other ones that did make the dress with the ruffles and kept them. And in that case, probably the ruffles were balancing out because she had a bit more, upper body
Yeah,
in the bust. And so then it did make it a more symmetrical
correct.
balance. Okay. Oh, I love that. Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
all of these things that like I see them and I'm like, oh, that doesn't work for you, but not really like knowing how to say why I think it doesn't
right.
work for you. So yeah, that's
Yep.
awesome. So I think we'll probably wrap it up there with our conversation about ruffles, because that was so informative and I
Yeah.
I love that. That's great. And so just share with everyone again where they can find you and how you want them to follow you and stay connected.
Okay. So you can find me on iTunes or Spotify or pretty much anywhere podcasts are. Bold Faith and Fashion is what it's called. AshliAnna Hurley is my name. And you can either email me, boldfaithandfashion@gmail.com, with any questions. Otherwise, you can join me and almost 200 other women on my Facebook group, which is also called Bold Faith and Fashion, where you can get live feedback from me. And yeah, I have What Not to Wear Wednesdays. It's super fun. So definitely join me on any of those platforms. I'd love it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. And I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for watching. You can shop tutorials and classes on my website, naomifeda.net. Be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, may God sow his love into your heart today.